So you must have heard a lot about the Ghana must go bag and how it relates to Ghanaians being expelled from Nigeria. And so many people are, connecting it to xenophobia. They said, yes, many African countries or West African countries or other foreigners in South Africa complaining of xenophobia, that Nigeria has also their own fair share in that issue of xenophobia, that the Nigerians expelled West Africans out of Nigeria in the 1980s. So in 1983, Nigeria expelled 2 million undocumented West African migrants, half of whom were from Ghana. The study-checked bags into which they pack their belongings have become a symbol of exclusion and intolerance. Nearly 4 decades later, the region is yet to confront its emotional baggage. It was the bags that made up Solomon Akwaya Asidu's mind. This is the man who shared the story. He's a Ghanaian, is still alive today. His name is Solomon Akwaya Asidu. This bag made up his mind. According to him, he said they were cheap, ordinary bags. They had no name and came in blue and red, in big and medium sizes, all checked. We know the bag. You can see the bag. They were wanted in Lagos markets with an intensity never experienced before. Nigerian traders sold out of the bags as hundreds, just to get as many as they could to pack their things into. The bags had always been popular. They were big and spacious and sturdy enough for long-haul travel. But it was when people started calling them Ghana must go bags that the young man knew it was time to leave. The bags followed him home as he crossed 2 countries to return to Ghana, and 30 years later, they still stare at him from stores on every corner with the same cursed name. They represent a period of despair that many Ghanaians would rather forget. According to Solomon Akwaya, he said, I was not ready to leave. He's now 67. He said, I had just one bag with me. That's the Ghana must go back. The year was 1983. The day was January 17. Akwaya had just listened to Shehu Shagari, the Nigerian leader who favored long hats, declared the expulsion of estimated 2 million undocumented migrants living in Nigeria. Half of them were Ghanaian. If they don't leave, they should be arrested and tried and sent back to their homes. Illegal immigrants, under normal circumstances, should not be given any notice whatsoever, said President Shehu Shagari. Akwaya and millions like him with no papers were told to get out within 2 weeks or risk jail. If you break a law, then you have to pay for it, said Shehu Shagari, the then president of Nigeria. 2 years before, Akwaya had arrived in Nigeria with 0 cash and 100 hopes. He had followed the road trail leading through Aflao in Ghana to Lome in Togo, then onwards through the Seme border between Nigeria and the Republic of Benin. He wasn't the only one, clicking his tongue at the memory. That time, everybody was going according to him. There was money in Nigeria. There was indeed. In 1958, Nigeria struck oil as a young, soon-to-be liberated country with population of 100 million. First, it was Shell Company, then Mobil, then Ajib. They set up shop in the country to drill oil commercially. The oil money was steady and hopes were high that Nigeria could prosper despite the brutal military regimes that marred that period. In the 1970s, the economy exploded when oil prices soared worldwide. The golden decade had arrived and the country became Africa's wealthiest, securing its title Giant of Africa. But today, I don't know if Nigeria still, holds that title. By 1974, Nigeria's oil wells were spitting out some 2 to 3 million barrels a day. The standard of living improved. There was an influx of people from the farms into the cities when they traveled. Robust iron boxes were generally preferred over cheap plastic sacks. The influx came not just from within Nigeria but from across the region. Sting law offices, shoe repair shops, ice cream parlors, restaurants and brothels were flooded with neighbors from the west. Life was good. Akwaya was lucky to secure a small room meant for domestic workers in one of the mansions that lined Kofo Abayomi Street. There he made friends with big men. According to him, he said, I even met Captain Gowon Jr. I knew him. Akwaya swears, jumping at the memory. Captain Isaiah Gowon is the younger brother of General Yakubu Gowon, the one-time military head of state of Nigeria. He was staying at the Plateau State Governor's house, and I was there as a security man. On the weekends, he joined the large crowds watching criminals being executed at Bar Beach. Then he ate banku, a Ghanaian specialty, and drank with friends. Even on his small salary, things were affordable. According to him, he said, I would go to Agege Market to buy food for the whole week and it would not reach 5 naira. He recalls incredulously. But it's not even the case now. Things are way higher in Nigeria. If you are a Nigerian, you will attest to it. He said, and then came the oil crash. Global oil prices started to dip in 1982 when larger consumer markets such as United States, Canada slipped into recession and demand was low. By 1983, the price of a barrel had fallen to $29, down from $37 in 1980. At around the same time, the US began producing its own oil, further cutting demand and causing excess supply. Nigeria, its economy almost exclusively reliant on oil, was hard hit. By 1982, 90% of the country's foreign reserves had been wiped out, according to the Washington Post. Food prices skyrocketed and salaries became erratic. Ajay, who had taken up a job as a public teacher in Kishi, Western Nigeria, felt the pinch. State governments could only pay salaries after 2 months. Poor policy decisions at the highest level of government only made things worse. Ghana's nightmare was being replayed in Nigeria. As it began to feel the crunch, Nigeria started to turn inwards. By 1982, politicians started to use words like alliance in their manifesto in preparation for the 1983 general election. They blamed African migrants, especially Ghanaians, for flailing economy. Ghanaians had taken all the jobs and brought crime to Nigeria, and if elected, they would chase them out, they promised. It didn't take long for this animosity to spill over into relations between Nigerians and Ghanaians. Acquire heard stories of Ghanaians being physically harassed and tried to keep out of trouble. Even with a weakening economy, Lagos Victoria Island was a gift and most people were nice to him. So when the announcement came that morning of January 17, 1983, Acquire was stunned. He doesn't remember now how much it cost to get the legal papers, but he had not bothered about it until then. No one really had. At first, Acquire thought he could avoid leaving. Ghana was still unstable with a military regime that was battling uprisings. He had no reason to go back. But after the announcements, the hostilities had grown. Rumors spread that the government had ordered locals to beat up any legal Ghanaian still in the country by January 31 deadline. Those plastic check bags were everywhere, heavy-hearted. Acquire packed some for a friend who decided to leave early to beat the crowds to the borders. By 30th, Acquire knew he couldn't risk anything. I left there, he said. I remember that it was the 31st I left. That was the last day. I left around 11:30 in the morning, he said. You say you won't go? If somebody kills you, who are you going to ask? The borders were a disaster, crammed with desperate people carrying chairs on their heads, dragging their check bags and selling off whatever they couldn't lift to make money to pay for fares that had doubled. Millions streamed out through any possible exit they could find. Through Shaki in western Nigeria to northern Benin, down south at the Seme border in Lagos, stampedes would kill many. Dozens were loaded onto open haulage trucks headed for Ghana. But Jerry Lawrence, Ghana's military head of state, had ordered the borders with Togo closed to deceased coup plotters and insurgents, so there would be no passage for days. In response, Togo closed its borders with Benin to avoid a refugee crisis. Cars stored bumper to bumper from the Benin-Togo border to Lagos, with people caught in sweltering heat and without water. Diseases spread. The United States prepared to send in aid. The League of Red Cross Societies airlifted 500 tents, 10,000 blankets, and thousands of buckets, according to the Washington Post. Even though there is little evidence to suggest that the absence of foreigners leads to a healthier economy, what they did was unethical, illegal, and just some kind of populist nonsense, and they got the population behind them, he said. It's very easy because the majority of citizens are so vulnerable, easy to manipulate, and they buy into these things and say, yes, we are suffering because these people are here. The Nigerian anti-foreigner directives happened despite the economic community of West African states protocols. introduced the decade before that allowed for some form of free movement for West Africans in the region, provided they have the right paperwork. But that's not the point, argues Ajay. Paperwork is foreign to the region where people have for centuries moved around undocumented by the often arbitrary borders imposed by colonial powers. Ghana's banning order, meanwhile, was a betrayal of Nkrumah's lauded Pan-Africanism, he says. In 1983, he hasn't had cause to, and he doubts he ever will, but he treasures the memories regardless, he says, wandering away from the noise of the school where he now works as a security guard and down a hilly path from where he could see Accra sprawled over hilltops in the distance. He has seen Ghana at its lowest, felt the rejection of being alien in Nigeria, and is now baffled at the news of Nigerian traders facing trouble in Kumasi. If something is here and I meet it, I will buy. This is not force to say you are spoiling any market because you are not from Ghana. How can one person sell everything? He asks, his hands spread out questioning. He shakes his head, turns and lumbers back up the hill, past the store still selling Ghana Must Go bags, and back towards the school. So that's the story of Ghana Must Go, as it was shared by Solomon Akwa, a Ghanaian. He's now 64 years of age. Is something that it happens everywhere. The demand, like you saw, you listed very well in the story, the demand for oil, which Nigeria economy largely depended on, nosedived, and it became like the country was in huge crisis. And there's no other way they could attack the crisis than telling all documented, migrants to leave without legal papers. You can stay in Nigeria. And if it is even what South Africans are doing, I would even appreciate it. But what they do is, out of jealousy and envy, attack Nigerian shops. They say they are selling drugs, which obviously they are not. They see that Nigerians are doing well. They own all the businesses in the major cities. Nigerians are building houses in Johannesburg, in many big cities in South Africa, and South Africans are paying for rent. That's what they don't like. And these guys are, they have legal papers. They are staying there legally. To me, there's no way you could compare Xenophobia and Ghana Must Go incident, because we have 2 million undocumented migrants in the country. They are not documented. They don't have legal papers. Though ECOWAS have their own protocol, it's even as of today, Economic Communication of West African State. If you have that green passport, ECOWAS passport, you could move to any of the ECOWAS states, so ECOWAS countries. It's still applicable today, but you can't imagine you having the legal papers in a country like South Africa, and then you are being bullied. Your shop is being attacked, and they are they are victimizing you. They are accusing you of selling drugs and all of that, which is not true. They are just being jealous and envy. That's just the thing.